At Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, delegates from 44 allied and associate countries arrived for the opening of the United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference.
Our story begins in 1944. With World War II coming to an end, the Allied nations met at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire to create a new financial system which would stabilize the world once the war ended. With America poised to enter a golden age of prosperity, the US dollar was chosen as the world's reserve currency.
The strength of a nation's currency is based on the strength of that nation's economy. And the American economy is by far the strongest in the world. Accordingly, I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
Back in history, do you think the US and the world would be better off had Mr. Richard Nixon not removed the gold standard? And the speed at which US Fed is printing dollars, what do you think is the future of fiat currencies in the world if there is no standard like gold standard where you need to have something as backing to print currency?
Yeah, my father was a strong proponent. He was in the United States Congress of the gold standard. So I listened for many years to the merits of the gold standard, but it does have a certain fundamental attraction, which you mentioned, in that politicians can't fool with the value of gold the way they can fool with the value of paper money. But it is not a practical, in my view, it is not a practical alternative as a monetary unit for a country like the United States, or really, I think probably in any country. I do not think it would. I think we would have a lot of problems, a whole lot of problems, if we were to go back to the gold standard. But that does not mean that a paper money standard doesn't have its weaknesses, and in some cases, extreme weaknesses. If you ask me whether the United States dollar is going to hold its purchasing power fully at the level of 2011, 5 years or 10 years, 20 years from now, I would tell you it will not. I would recommend against buying long-term fixed dollar investments at present interest rates. I do not think you are compensated for the currency risk in most countries, adequately compensated for the currency risks in fixed dollar investments. So I would hold no long-term government bonds of almost any government, really the countries I'm familiar with. I would much rather own businesses or pieces of businesses. I don't think it's even close. It's very hard to take away the value. You can raise corporate taxes and do certain things, but it's hard to take away the fundamental value of a good business. It's very easy to take away the value of a fixed dollar investment. And we've seen it in the United States over the years. Now, at other times when interest rates are much higher, there can actually be money to be made in bonds, but that certainly is not the case now.
The United States today is sitting on a whopping debt of more than $36 trillion. No country in the history has ever had this kind of debt. Its debt to GDP ratio is more than 120%, highest ever in the history of United States. The US's interest outgo per annum is more than $1 trillion, which is more than its defense budget, more than its pharma budget. US needs to borrow $1 to prop up the GDP by more than $0.58. US is in a state of mess. Unless drastic measures are taken, it's an economy in deep, deep trouble.
in the Lord's name does Putin think gives him the right to declare new so-called countries on territory that belong to his neighbors? This is a flagrant violation of international law, and it demands a firm response from the international community. So today, I'm announcing the first tranche of sanctions to impose costs on Russia in response to their actions yesterday. These have been closely coordinated with our allies and partners, and will continue to escalate sanctions if Russia escalates. We're implementing full blocking sanctions on two large Russian financial institutions, VEB and their military bank. We're implementing comprehensive sanctions on Russian sovereign debt. That means we've cut off Russia's government from Western financing. It can no longer raise money from the West and cannot trade in its new debt on our markets or European markets either.
Out of the White House, where US President Donald Trump has signed tariffs on imports from Canada, Mexico and China, America's top trading partners. Now, a 25% tariff is imposed on Canadian goods, with a 10% levy placed on Canadian oil exports. Mexico has been slapped with a similar 25% tax. President Trump has also placed a 10% tariff on all Chinese goods coming into the United States. The White House says that the tariffs are meant to, quote, hold China, Mexico and Canada accountable for the flow of undocumented immigrants and fentanyl into the United States. The tariffs are set to come into effect on Tuesday. That's according to the administration.
I think it's high time we ask these tough questions to ourselves today. Question number one, are we in an everything bubble caused by incessant printing of US dollars by the US Fed, especially during and after the 2008 subprime crisis and during COVID? Second, is this the beginning of an ensuing collapse of the US economy and as a result the world economy as we know them today? Third, has de-dollarization now begun with full swing? Fourth, is this the beginning of the end of the US hegemony over the world economy? Fifth, are we in an economic reset? Is the world order about to change? And last but not the least, are the US and the world stock markets on the brink of collapse? These are tough questions. There's no easy answer, but we need to reconsider that.
Magnificent Seven has significantly outperformed the broader S&P 500, rising more than 120% over that period. But can the magnificence of the Mag 7 really last?
The US stock market is experiencing something that it has never experienced before. We are experiencing today the most crowded trade in the history of stock market ever. Approximately $18 trillion is following 8 stocks known as the Magnificent 8, or as someone coined it, the Batman stocks, namely Broadcom, Amazon, Tesla, Meta, Microsoft, Alphabet, Apple and nvidia. Now contrast this to India. India's total GDP today is approximately $4 to $4.25 trillion. The total market cap of all stocks listed on Indian stock market is approximately $5 to $5.25 trillion. There are 3 stocks in the United States market which are individually trading at $3 trillion market cap. And $18 trillion via ETF, via passive money, via mad money is blindly following 18 stocks. This makes it the most crowded trade in the history of stock market ever. We'd seen a smaller version of this in the 2008 tech bubble. So the $1 trillion question we have to ask ourselves today, are we in a AI bubble today? And is this bubble going to burst?